8.
The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Yes, it is Eye on the World with Selwyn Manning joining us. Good morning to you, Selwyn.
Yeah, good morning, Glenn.
Good morning. Now, can you give us an update on the situation there in North Africa, particularly with Libya at the moment?
Yeah, sure. Now, the northeast and North Africa, those theatres where this war is really starting to embed in, is continuing on. We've got fighting between obviously the pro-Gaddafi ground forces and against the Libyan rebel forces. And obviously the coalition, the NATO-led coalition, is still continuing with its aerial attacks. Special forces are definitely in there doing their bit, and also there's US PSYOPs teams continuing to try and break the psychological back of those pro-Gaddafi loyalists that are trying to stop the push of the rebels from the east toward the west of the country.
Currently, at the moment, looking at some extraordinary footage of some very large guns on what looks to be on the back of rebel trucks fighting in a built-up area. So it looks like street-to-street sort of fighting at the moment.
Yeah, it really is. What's happened here is, like you can see, there's that's an anti-aircraft gun type of thing stuck on the back of a ute, bolted down pretty hard by the look of it, and they're using that for semi-heavy artillery kind of fire to take on tanks and things in the towns and cities. From what we can pick up from US intelligence, mainly that's seeping into the public arena, is that pro-Gaddafi tanks, those loyalists are inside the cities, but to get there, they'd infiltrated into different groups and sat quiet and basically like sleepers sitting there waiting for the call. Once their support came through, then there was an uprising. It seems that's what the tactic was when we saw the rebels sweeping across the west toward Tripoli. And everybody thought, including the United States and the big nations, that really those towns had fallen to the rebels. Well, it wasn't the case, that there was certainly further fighting to be done in those areas.
Yeah, now, as you've already also mentioned, diplomacy is underway. What is the peace plan?
Now, this has been happening overnight New Zealand time. Early yesterday New Zealand time, it started off with South Africa's President, Jacob Zuma. He took a flight into Tripoli. So the airspace was opened up. The coalition forces opened up the airspace for Zuma to fly in. It was a smart move. He was basically going in, Glenn, as an envoy for the African Union. And at Gaddafi's request, he met with Gaddafi and they tried to work out some sort of roadmap to peace. This title that's been given around the region from time to time, particularly with Israel and Palestine and issues. Now Zuma came out of that meeting with Gaddafi very positive. And by yesterday afternoon, he had already been in, and we, once again, for those who heard last week's program, we talked about how air traffic control communications have been intercepted and put onto the internet. Now that's continued on. We know that Zuma flew from Tripoli into Malta, and he was in Malta for around about 2 hours. And in that 2 hours, it's believed that he met with, obviously, the coalition, representatives of the coalition, the NATO-led forces, but significantly with representatives from Britain, from France, and the United States. There, it gets a little bit clouded. What we do know is another representative of the African Union then was able to meet with the Libyan rebels. Now, at that point, there's been a negotiation that's gone down. Gaddafi's bottom line is that he would call off all what's happening up there. He would pull his troops back into their cage, basically, is what he was saying he would commit to. Now, the problem with that, Glenn, is that he wanted to stay, and in some capacity. His son is saying, he's speaking out to state television in Libya, saying it is time for new blood, but it's not time to replace Gaddafi, his father. Now that's just unacceptable to those who are trying to get rid of Gaddafi for obvious reasons. And they have said early this morning, in the breaking news aspect, is the rebels are saying no way, we're not going there.
Okay. Talk also, Selwyn, of a media uprising.
Yeah, now this is an interesting one. In the east of the country, where Gaddafi really has no influence anymore, so it's in the far east of Libya, what we're seeing is the rising of free press. And a lot of the journalists that once were controlled by Gaddafi's people, the security forces and everybody else, just clamping down and making sure that the only things that were printed were things that were favourable to Gaddafi himself. Well, they've been unleashed, and they've been publishing newspapers, giving them away. For those who can see this on the video, they see newspapers there in the hands of some of the people handing them out. Got to say, they're on very, very high quality newsprint. These publications, which would probably indicate, I mean, it's a bit of a guess, but one would probably indicate, considering the state of Libya at the moment, that those publications are being printed by Western-friendly nations. And we also see in Qatar, for example, there's a new television station of Libya, a Libyan television station that is a free one, that is being produced in Qatar and beamed in through internet stream, and also broadcast where it can into the eastern sides of Libya. So it's quite an uprising, yeah.
Yeah, do the CIA, do they have a mobile printing press, Selwyn, do you think?
I've probably got it on back of one of those great big aircraft we were talking about last week. It's probably rolling as we speak, Glenn.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I'll play a short clip here, Obama giving an address.
Last night,
yeah.
Weeks of long and difficult negotiations over our national budget, leaders of both parties came together to avert a government shutdown, cut spending, and invest in our future. This is good news for the American people.
Good news for the American people, Selwyn.
Yeah, now, why that's significant in this whole thing is basically the problems back home, the domestic political problems that Obama had, seem to be anticipated, or Gaddafi was anticipating, we think, that there was going to be some sort of lull in the strikes that were happening against his own forces on the ground in Libya, that the problems Obama had back in the US basically came down to a potential shutdown, meaning that all government services, essential services, would shut down right across the United States. But even its military forces, its soldiers on the ground in theatres all over the globe, they wouldn't have got their paychecks, as Obama said. Now, it came down to around about a 12-hour deadline before the Congress actually agreed on that. But the problem, if Gaddafi was thinking that there would be some sort of lull because the United States domestic situation was very fragile, he was wrong. The NATO forces, and certainly Britain, France, and the North European nations continued those airstrikes in a fairly, very solid and powerful way.
So in the meantime, though, there must be this humanitarian crisis simmering in the background.
Yeah, that's right. In amongst all of this mess, Qatar and those Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea kind of states, they've been really coordinating the humanitarian front. But also the United Nations Security Council, it sat late last week and it was hearing an update on what was going on. It knows that civilians have been killed and injured in fairly large numbers by both sides in this conflict. And it also heard how a ship, for example, was able to berth in some of the ships were able to berth in some of the North Libyan ports and get some real hard end kind of medical assistance to those people to get food in. And there's something like 40 tons of food has gone in, but that essential medical supplies with people. The Security Council heard that the airstrikes needed to continue to basically protect many of the civilians that were in need of medical help from being in further danger. So that was the argument that the Security Council was getting presented with, and mainly from United Nations envoys that had been close to what is happening up there. So it's a UNDP and others were also involved in those talks late last week. So the whole thing is kind of, it's a delicate one. That while they're acknowledging that people do need medical assistance, the airstrikes are still continuing, trying to target military facilities in Libya, but at the same time there's acknowledgement that human casualties are occurring as well.
Before we go, Selwyn, can we look at some of the possible outcomes here?
Yeah, now the geopolitical kind of aspects of this are really starting to take form. For the African Union to actually be involved in this whole thing, what we're seeing is that Gaddafi is running out of choices here. He's running out of options. He already tried to actually have these similar meetings with the United States representatives. He tried to have it with British representatives. He tried it with the United Nations. Now with the African Union, it's his last port of call, really, and it shows that he's getting into a desperate situation. Gaddafi really does now need to find a way through this if he wants to save his skin and that of his regime, and those doors are shut. Really, the thing comes down to two. If Gaddafi positions as a serious the proposal as a serious effort to stop his own fighting, he does need, as everybody has said, all the coalition has said, the United Nations said, he's just simply, Glenn, he's got to pull his troops back into Tripoli and say no more fighting, a ceasefire, and then things would settle down, there'd be some sort of dialogue going on. But he hasn't done that. The rebels, on the other hand, by turning down this thing, carte blanche, are in a situation where Gaddafi could exploit. So over this week, you may see a little bit of that diplomacy kind of juxtapositioning happening. But Zuma, you've got to watch Zuma. He's an impressive MP. He's much more popular in South Africa than anyone ever gave him credit. So he was able to get the closest to getting some sort of deal on the table. No one else has gone near there.
Well, Selwyn Manning, for Eye on the World, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you in 2 weeks' time.
Okay, Glenn, take care.